Hey, in this lesson we are going to discuss about the user registration process. But first, I still owe you some explanation about how to display short messages to the user, something like when the user login wasn't successful. These are called flash messages. Laravel uses the session class to create and pass these messages. And again, we'll use the bootstrap CSS to style our messages. So, this is the main.blade.php file, our main layout. Starting with line 24, I've added some code that will check for the presence of the message session variable and will display it accordingly. I styled the elements with bootstrap. So, if the session contains the message variable, we display it by using the alertInfo class. But we can also specify another class depending on the error that we want to display. For example, let's get back to our usercontroller.php file. Inside the logout function, I'm going to add a new parameter when requesting the login view. We'll set its name as message and its value as you have successfully logged out. Also, I will specify another alert class that I want the message to use. Let's say alert danger. This is a bootstrap CSS class. So, back to our main layout, we are using the get function of the session class to check for the alert class variable presence. As the second parameter, we specified a default class to be used in case we don't provide an alert class variable with our request. So in case the variable is missing, the default alertInfo will be used. Let's get back to our browser and see how the message looks. I'm going to log into my application, and if I log out, a nice message is displayed in an alert danger class styled box. If we inspect this element, we can indeed see that this class of the box is alert danger. Now, this alert danger is nice, but I don't want to use it to display my logout message. So I will remove the line that's passing this variable to the login view. As I specified earlier, in the absence of the alert class variable, the alertInfo class will be used by default. So, back to our browser, let's log in again in the application and then log out. Now the same message is displayed, but this time in a blue-like color. If we inspect our message box again, this time we can see that the default alertInfo class has been applied to it. So I will leave this the way it is now, but on my post-login function, if the authentication of the user fails, I would like to display a message letting him know about this. So I'll pass a variable called message having the value of invalid username password combination to the login view request. And this time I also want to use the alert danger class to display the message. So I will add the alert class variable to my request along with its alert danger value. So now if I try to log in by using a wrong username password combination, an error message is displayed. Great! Next, let's start implementing our register view. I'll start by duplicating the login view, as we will need to make minor changes to it. So I will save the file as register.blade.php. According to the database, the fields that we need to implement in our registration form are username, email, and password. Username is already declared, so I will copy its declaration, we'll paste it, and then we'll change the username into an email field. Next, there's the password. I will again copy its declaration and will paste it one more time as our password confirmation field. I'm going to rename this field into password confirmation. It is important to keep this notation, so later when we try to validate the password field, we will take into account this confirmation field. So I will rename all these fields into password_confirmation. And lastly, I will change the submit button label from login into register. And that's about it. let's see the form in action. Good, now that our form is created, it's time to implement the actual register method. So I'll switch back to my user controller file, and inside the post register function, the first thing we have to do is to actually validate the user input. We saw how we can do this in the login lesson, but now let's do it in another way. Let's implement this in the model class. So I'll open up the user model and we'll create a new public static function called validate. Inside the function, I will declare my rules variable, an array that will hold our validation rules. This time I will be more specific with the rules. Let's start with the username. I want this to be required to have a minimum of 3 characters and a maximum of 50. Also, I want this to accept only alphanumerical characters, so only letters and numbers. Next is the email field. I also want this to be required to satisfy the condition for an email address, meaning that this will contain a username, the @ and a domain for the email. Next, I want the email to be unique amongst the users table, so no duplicate email addresses will be accepted. Then there's the password. This will also be required. I want the user to specify between 4 and 10 characters for the password. This is another way of using the min and max parameters. And I want the password to be the same as the one specified in the password_confirmation field. I also want the password to be of alphanumerical type. And I have to change this to alphanum for the username also. Now you understand why I say that it's important for our password confirmation field to be named exactly like this? So, if I switch back to the registration view, we can see that the name for our password confirmation field is exactly password_confirmation. And back to our model, the last field will be password_confirmation, which I want to also be required and accept between 4 and 10 characters. Now that our rules have been declared, let's actually validate the user input. There's no need to add rules to the password confirmation field because this has to be the same as the password field, and we added the rules for that field. But anyway, let's type some rules here also. Now that our rules have been declared, let's actually validate the user input. First, our validation method will accept one parameter. We will call it input. And finally, our function will call the make function of the validator class by passing the input variable as a parameter, followed by the rules variable, the one that we declared earlier. Back to our controller file, I will declare a new variable that will hold our user validate function response and will pass input all as an argument for this function. Input all grabs all the input data entered by our user. Next, we'll use the validator passes method to verify the validation status. In a previous lesson, we used the fails function of the validator class. This time we use the opposite function, passes. This function returns true in case the validation has succeeded and false in case the validation failed. So, in case of success, we attempt to create the user or to add it to the database. We use the userCreate function to do that by passing an array which will contain our input data. So the username will be equal to input get username, and same does the email and password fields. And finally, we redirect the user to the login page along with the "You have successfully registered" message. Otherwise, in case our validation fails, we redirect the user to the same login page, but this time by passing the validator object as an error parameter. Let's refresh the page and oops, I forgot to use double colons on this get function call. And another thing, in case the validation fails, we will redirect the user to the register page in order to give them another chance to register, and not to the login page as I said earlier. Let's refresh the page, and if I simply press the registration button, the errors are being displayed. Let's fill the form and see how it goes. But wait, I want the username field to also be unique amongst the users table, so no duplicate usernames will be accepted. I'll switch back to usercontroller.php file, and on line 37 I'll add unique to the end of the line, but still inside the quotes. Let's refresh the page and enter some data. I want to register a new user called Simon. We'll use Simon for the username, simon@library.com for the email field, and 1234 for both password fields. Let's press register, and oops, validation rule unique requires at least one parameters. Looks like I forgot to specify the table for the unique rule, so I'll switch back to my model file and will add :users after the unique rule. So the username will have to be unique amongst the users table now. Let's refresh the page one more time, and another error pops up. This one telling us that a mass assignment exception has occurred. But what is this mass assignment? When creating a new model, you pass an array of attributes to the model constructor. These attributes are then assigned to the model via mass assignment. This is convenient, however, can be a serious security concern when blindly passing user input into a model. If user input is blindly passed into a model, the user is free to modify any and all of the model's attributes. For this reason, all Eloquent models protect against mass assignment by default. In order to disable the mass assignment protection, we'll have to declare a new protected variable in our model class, one called fillable. This will be an array containing all the model's properties that we want our users to be able to modify. In our case, this will be username, email, and password. Let's give another refresh to our page, and this time "You have successfully registered" message is displayed. Great, but let's double check that with our database to see if the record has actually been inserted. Back to phpMyAdmin and browsing the users table, we can see a new record with the ID of 4 and username of Simon. The password is also encrypted as expected. One thing that I want to modify is to change the S from Simon to be lowercase, the same as for the other usernames. Back to our web browser, let's try logging in with the new user. I will use Simon with lowercase s and 1234 as the password, and great, we are able to log in. No book is being displayed because we didn't assign any to our newly created user. Let's log out and let's try registering another user, but this time I will use the same username, email, and password combination as for Simon. If we press the register button, we receive two errors. One telling us that the username already exists, and the second one telling us the same thing about the email address. Let's try to register with an already available username but with different email address. We also type different passwords for the password and password confirmation fields. As expected, the errors are being displayed, letting us know that the username has been already taken and the password confirmation does not match, so our validation rules are working properly. To summarize, in this lesson we discussed about the registration process of our app. We created our registration form and implemented the validation and registration functions. I hope that you enjoyed this lesson, and thanks for watching.